This is a video about using Obsidian, which is a particular program I found really helpful in my PhD so far. And here's a few reasons why you might find it useful too. So the first is, while I'm here, is to show you about reading notes. So reading notes is where I've got a book and I want to make notes on it, and I don't want those notes to be sort of just in the book itself or in all sorts of different places. I want them to be in one easy to reach place. So if I go, for example, to I recently last week finished noting on this book by Simon Dyson, Sickle Cell and Social Sciences, Health, Racism and Disablement. What I've done is I've got this note here, and if I go kind of down here, it shows by the headings I've made my notes on different parts of it. So, for example, if I go to his short history of sickle cell, which was a really great chapter, I've written here a bunch of notes that are the most kind of prominent things for me that I want to kind of come back to. So some of them are in the form of individual ideas, and I'll show you one of those in a minute, because that's the second reason I think this is really useful. But if we just focus on how it's useful for summarizing books, you can, just have notes that are for each book that you've read or each paper that you've read that you think is particularly helpful. I don't actually put every paper on here, but ones that I think are really valuable that I want to come back to, I put here. And it's really easy to type in. You just kind of type as you would normally. If you've got a quote, you just open a quote with a triangle bracket and start typing. And that's a quote there. If you want to do italics, then it's just as you would normally. You can just do Control and I or Command I. It's a really nice way, I find, to be able to start making notes. So number two is, and I think this is where it gets a whole lot more useful than other ways of taking notes about books, is that you can easily make links to particular ideas that are coming up. So, for example, as I'm reading Dyson and others, one idea that comes up quite often is this idea of sickle cell disease becoming an emblematically black disease. And so if I click on this note here, then I've started by coming across this quote from Stuart Hall, who says sickle cell is an emblematically black disease. And I've written a personal experience that a friend had, something that relates to this. But now I've started to kind of expand this in different places. So things that I've read that show this isn't really an accurate notion. Where does the idea come from? A lot of it's drawing on this book that I've been noting from. But then it also comes up in other places. So this book by Keith Wailoo, which is sort of history of sickle cell disease, also this kind of is relevant to this notion of sickle cell as an emblematically black disease. I'm linking out some other ideas. So some of my early reading about biopower. This is an ethnography by Carolyn Moxley Rouse that I've been reading, where this comes up as well. And another particular ethnography in Brazil. So you can sort of see that this is now a note that didn't start very long, but as ideas have come up in different places, I've found myself adding to this note quite often, and it then kind of links to other ideas that have come up elsewhere. So the third reason why I want to suggest this reading could be useful is because it's not just about reading notes. So if I go to this one here, this note here, which is a lot earlier, a lot smaller, but this came up initially in a early career research sort of forum at the Wolfson at Queen Mary, where a researcher in a completely different field was talking about this concept that changes in attitude towards a group aren't always in a progressive direction. They go back and forth. And at the time I thought, oh, that's quite significant and important, and I maybe haven't talked about this enough, but I want to record this because I think it might be relevant elsewhere. And indeed it was. It sort of started coming up in other things I was reading about sickle cell. And this is still quite early on, but you can see that what's quite powerful here is that it's not just a place to put notes about what you're reading, but what you're thinking or conversations you've had. I've got notes here. Some of these are things that came up just in conversations or in podcasts or all sorts. And the great thing is you can just put in. You don't have to think about where the links are going to be initially. You do them over time. Like here's literally a note. I've just seen this. this was something that had been talked about in our research group, the hidden work of GPs, and yeah, I just noted how my daughter, who always waves at train drivers, on one day a train driver said over the intercom, I was got on a train, to my young friend who waved me from the platform, "I hope you have a brilliant day." And I just thought, oh, this is really significant. I want to write this down somewhere. The driver kind of being invisible, and there's something about my my daughter waving at him that sort of was significant. So yes, so there's something that literally I just don't want to forget it, and I don't know if it's ever going to be relevant in my work, but it might be, and it might be that over time, as I kind of link to other things, yeah, that comes. So I think it's a really powerful way of linking things. So I've got kind of stuff for books I'm reading. I've got stuff for papers I'm reading. So some of these are super early. I just kind of thought, oh, this is something I do need to read, but I haven't done much of it yet. But let's find, for example, if I show, where's a good example? I read this paper by Susan Lee Starr about the ethnography of infrastructure, and again, just made a few notes on things that I thought were particularly important that I want to come back to. I haven't linked it out very far yet, but it's a nice place for me to come back to remember what the paper's about, and hopefully kind of has a lot of the juice of it in there. The fourth reason that I think this is a really nice program to use is you can set it up to link in with other programs really well. So I actually use it to do quite a bit of writing. So if I show, for example, something that I was working on here, let's go to this here. So this was a draft of a paper that I was writing with a couple of others, and it doesn't really matter the paper here, but just to show you what happens with it, if I now put here a particular plugin I've got, I can export it as a Word document. It exports, and now if I go to my desktop and click on this, then it's just immediately exported into Word. And if it had other formatting, the formatting generally comes up quite nicely. So that's cool from that side, but actually maybe even more useful. Yeah, and here's another one that I just showed an example. It was me writing my protocol, and yeah, it just gets most of the formatting right, and you don't have to spend a huge amount of time kind of going back through it to change it after. So if I now show you on Zotero, so this is the other thing that's nice, is so I use Zotero as my reference management software. So there's stuff here that I think I want to have, then what I'll do is I'll automatically get the references using my browser plugin on Chrome. So I'll kind of get the references from there, might update them if they haven't come out quite right. But then what I can do is I've set up my Obsidian to talk to my Zotero. So let's say there's a paper that I've read that I want to make a note on here. I've got a way of doing that where if I search for, let's find a sickle cell paper. So let's say I wanted to have a note about this particular paper here, help me manage my sickle cell pain. I would do that here, and automatically it's made me a little literature note, which is really basic, but is still quite useful. And I can now move this into my sickle cell literature review box, and I can immediately just start typing and saying in this, what jumps out to me here is this relates to let's say this note that I've thought about earlier, pain being always new to the sufferer but losing originality to onlookers. And then later on when I come back to this, I click on that. Here we go, here's some other places where that seems significant. So yeah, I think it's really useful for all these reasons, and if anyone is interested in using it more, I can send some links about getting started. There's a bit of a learning curve. I'd say it probably takes a couple of hours to get everything set up, and then probably a few hours before you're really fluent with it. But now I find it's a really important part of my workflow, and it's just given me the confidence that I think what I'm reading, I'm really learning and digesting, and I'll be able to come back to and find later on, which the doubt about that in my mind before has been something that's really made it harder for me to be motivated to read, really, because I've always thought, oh gosh, am I ever gonna remember this? So yeah, if anyone would like some more advice about how to get started with this, I would be happy to point you in some right directions.